Hey everyone, welcome to the Naked Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Sage Hobbs, author and creator of Naked Communication, and I'm so psyched you're here. This show is all about taking charge of your life in new and inspired ways to create a life you deeply love. It's about being more you in all areas of your life, more courageous, more free, more alive, more naked. I'll be sharing stories and advice from amazing people around the world who are up to incredible things on how they are successfully breaking free from fear and old patterns in order to create incredible relationships and impactful lives so that you can do the same. This is the place to be inspired to live a courageous and naked life. Let's do this. Hey everyone, I'm super stoked to introduce you to Erica Barth today. She is seriously one of my best friends of a couple decades, so we definitely have a lot of laughter in this episode. And we really talk about some things that are super dear to both of our hearts. Erica is the owner of the Harlem Yoga Studio, an award-winning studio in New York City that's really known for its strong cultivation of community, diversity, and a welcoming atmosphere. And we get into all of that. How do you build community, maybe in cross-cultural situations that aren't always comfortable or familiar? How do you really take your inner work and showcase it in a bigger way to be of service in the world in a bigger way? We talk about microaggression. We talk about racism. We talk about what it really means to be both a go-getter with a background in business and then really find a new path for yourself in the yoga world, but really want to serve in a way that is new to you. It is an incredible conversation where Erica brings her background in business, organizational change, organizational psychology, and yoga all together to be of service both of corporations and to communities in Harlem and beyond. Really psyched to dive in. It's amazing. If you're curious at all about social justice, about how you can be of service through your work, about how you can speak up even when it's scary, about how you can really make a change in your own life to walk a different path, even if it wasn't the path you were originally on, this is an episode for you. Can't wait to share more with you. There's incredibly good stuff in our show notes with resources that we mention and talk about in this episode. So if you want some details and information around where you can be of service, or you just have further questions around what some of these issues around microaggression and social justice are, you can find them in the show notes. Let's do it. It's a super fun one. Hey everyone, welcome back to Naked Conversations. I'm so psyched you're here. Today I have with me like a person who is super special in my heart. She's one of my favorite people in the world. We've known each other literally for a couple of decades and have kind of grown up together in all of our adventures and life's callings. And so I'm super psyched to introduce you to Erica Barth and have you have the opportunity to learn from all of the ways that she is speaking up and making a difference in the world. And we're going to have a blast. We might laugh. We might pee our pants. We've been known to do that before. So Erica, welcome. So glad you're here.
Thanks. You were going to make me cry at the beginning of the interview. Hi, Sagey.
It is Naked Conversations.
I'm very excited to be here.
So the very first question I like to ask people is, what does courage mean to you?
Oh, that's a good one. I think courage means doing something even though you're afraid, as opposed to, not being afraid of things and, not having the fear. I think it's sort of having a fear and knowing that you can sort of move past that. And I think it's not necessarily taking crazy risks, but it's taking, calculated risks is what I would say. Taking risks that you've thought about and that you think will, move you forward even while you're a little bit scared.
Awesome. I love hearing what people have to say about that because I feel like fear comes up a lot, but what is really the powerful edge of fear is courage, like if you didn't face it down, you really wouldn't have the opportunity to grow and expand. So thank you. Yay.
But yeah, if you're not scared, it's not exciting. If you're not a little scared.
Totally. Okay, so tell this community a bit about what you do and how you came to do it.
Sure. So I am co-owner of a yoga studio in Harlem, and I also have my own consulting business that combines organizational consulting, looking at systems and group dynamics with embodied awareness in yoga.
Okay, right there, I'm going to stop you for a second. For those who are listening and have never stepped onto a yoga mat, I want you to tell them what you mean by embodied awareness, please.
Sure. Yes, of course. So embodied awareness just means, and this is actually, I've been like an athlete my whole life, and I think the embodied awareness part came much later for me, even though I would have always said I'm athletic. I'm making air quotes, which you can't see, or that I'm in my body. But I think embodied awareness is having this sense of what's happening in your body sort of moment to moment and not thinking about it necessarily as like a task to achieve or in yoga, I assume a lot of people at least know what yoga is. Not necessarily that you can nail that perfect asana pose, but more just listening to, being curious about, exploring your body in a way that takes you out of the constant chatter of your mind.
Got it. So it's really being present to what's going on in your body and quieting the mind in order to show up for that.
Yeah, and not thinking of the body, not being present to it only with the goal of, some kind of athletic achievement. And I guess I say that when I say that, I think I'm talking to myself, because how I was in my body for many years, and probably still my default is to perform. Yeah. And that's part of it, but it's not all
totally. I feel like that's a real trap in some ways of what's happened with Western yoga too. Like, it should be about mindfulness and presence and stuff, and it can become another competitive athletic form. At least where I live here in Boulder, and I imagine in New York also, there are certain places where it's still got that edge to it of who can do it the best.
Oh, absolutely. I think, and we've probably talked about this before, but probably the reason I got so into yoga and didn't allow that to happen to me, which that could be my natural tendency, is because I was still playing other sports. So soccer was the thing that I went and did and really tried to win. And yoga was this time at the beginning, at the time when I first started, it was this 2.5 hours once a week. Just from the beginning, didn't think about it like a sport. It was this time where I sat in a purple carpeted circular room, weirdly.
I've been to that circle room with you once.
Yeah, you can't. I dragged you there.
We climbed up 3 stories of stairs in a random New York building, and there was yoga on the carpet. I was like, this is strange, but awesome.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that was my introduction to what yoga is, because I think had I come in a different way, my natural tendency may have been to just be obsessed with getting a handstand. Not that there's anything wrong with getting a handstand. I still want to get one.
Oh, a handstand. Got it. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, this is so good. So for those who are maybe never done yoga before who are listening, your yoga studio in Harlem is super unique, I think, which is really why I wanted to have you on, because it's so much more than about yoga. And there are 2 pieces of it that I feel make it really special. And so if you've never done yoga before, you would totally be welcome at Erica's studio. Can you tell the people a little bit about the 2 main themes around your studio, around justice and everybody?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started the studio, and we were just so lucky, my business partner, Laurel, and I, who's now one of my dearest friends, we wanted from the very beginning a place where the entire community felt welcome. And so we were so clear at the very beginning on our mission of making the studio a community place. We had this idea, we would talk about it, we want it to be we want people to hang out and drink tea, and we want everyone to get to know each other. And not being, not living in New York, I can just give you a little bit of the background on Harlem. Harlem is one of those neighborhoods that has changed immensely in the past 15 years. And so, it was a predominantly African-American community for many, many years, and it's become sort of rapidly gentrified, and all the good and the bad that comes with that. And so as 2 white women opening a small business in a predominantly Black neighborhood, we were very, very aware of wanting to be really, as careful and as anti-racist as we could be. And the welcoming was not just about that, but it was certainly in part about that. It was also about, wanting people to feel comfortable doing yoga who were bigger bodied, who had never done yoga before, who may have some kind of, injury or illness. And so we, from the very beginning, and I think a little bit of that was in part to where we got our training. We got our initial training at the Integral Yoga Institute, which is that purple room where I took you. That was their uptown center, but they have a bigger downtown center. And they really sort of seeded that idea that yoga is for everybody. And then I think we grew with it a little bit, and we wanted a little bit more shout it from the rooftops. Hey, guess what? Yoga is not just for skinny white ladies, at all.
Right.
And so we were, we tried to make that the case as much as we could from the very beginning.
And no, that's okay. I want to pause for just 1 second, because that was a huge undertaking, right? You stepped into Harlem, which has an incredible history in the African-American community of being really an arts and cultural kind of mecca for the Black community in the United States. And can you tell the listeners a little bit about how you made that decision? And then, you came with so much conscious awareness, and yet I'm sure there were some challenges, right? How did you actually walk that path? Because I know people who are listening, most of these listeners, there's some curiosity that they have around how they want to show up in their own lives in, in meaningful ways and make meaningful connections and relationships. And, that was pretty bold of you.
Yeah. And, I will give credit to the boldness to my partner, Laurel, who she did live in Harlem. So Laurel and her husband have been living in Harlem for many years. And so it was her neighborhood. And she was seeing the changes that were happening. And she had good friends, all over the place in the neighborhood. And she was noticing, and I was noticing, that there was a million restaurants opening, but there weren't a whole bunch of businesses that were at all dedicated to health or wellness or, sort of connection and community that were popping up. Everything was like a new restaurant, which is, how real estate goes. And I would say, I think at the time I was a graduate school in Columbia getting my master's in social organizational psychology. So I think I was very steeped in, cross-cultural communication and just understanding a lot of racial dynamics because it was just stuff I was learning in school and stuff I guess I'm naturally interested in and naturally predisposed to sort of agree with. But it was also, I was learning, I hadn't heard of microaggressions until I heard of microaggressions. And then I knew what they were.
Tell people what they are, because I'm sure that a lot of people have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I wish I could remember the name of the professor and maybe we could find it, but she was actually at Columbia, the professor who had sort of, I guess, coined this term, I believe. But microaggressions are just ways in which, racist things can happen in these tiny little ways. So it's not like horrible, obvious, violent or aggressive acts of racism, but little things, little smites that can happen throughout the day to people of color and the impact that can have on both the individual and the community. And it's I could think of an example, it's become sort of so much part of our culture, but, I think even the way that, for example, a shopkeeper might in some parts of the world and probably still in New York in some ways stand closer to a person of color while they're walking around a store. They're not rude. They're not kicking them out, but they're, if that happens all day, every day, little things like that. I think that's
actually that's an example that Mahershala, I'm not sure I'm saying his name right, Ali, who's that absolutely amazing actor from the movie Moonlight, which won Best Picture. Oh my gosh. Ooh, I love that movie so much. I can't even talk about how much I love that movie as a former middle school counselor, and as a mom and as a woman, to watch the path that child went through. And he played an extraordinary a character. Anyways, that's one of the examples he gives, that how wild it's been to go from being followed at Barney's to being fawned over.
Yeah.
And then he's whoa, same person, same huge body and presence that he always had, but now he's famous. So, and actually I'll look up, either you or I can find out who the professor is for microaggressions, and I can put links to some of these things in the show notes. So thank you though. So you were enveloped in the conversations from a sort of academic lens because you were studying, and then you had your business partner was living there, but then you actually stepped in, the two of you, and did this as two white women. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did. We were we think the community could use this business. We are both, this about me. I studied in undergraduate. I went to business school and I got my degree in entrepreneurial management. And up until that moment, I had never thought of anything I liked enough, cared about enough, was passionate about enough that I wanted to strike off on my own because, I'm actually I'm not anymore, but I think for much of my life, I would have said I'm pretty risk averse, right? So I had to really love something. And I loved what yoga did for me. And not really just the poses. Just the community of it and the connection to spirituality in a way that felt somewhat scientific, and the linkage to Buddhism and different things. So I loved it so much. And I think we were both so passionate about it. And I guess we just felt like we could do it. We were we are really clear. We're going to really make it as welcoming as possible. We're going to commit to having full-figured classes on the schedule. We're going to commit to having donation-based classes on the schedule from the get-go. We're going to commit to having classes for pregnant women and for children. So our scope of everybody. So our mission statement is, being warm, welcoming, and accessible for everybody. And to the best of our abilities, we really did that from the beginning. There are certain things, unfortunately, we can't cater to all people because of the way our building works. So we don't have an elevator. So unfortunately, we have to go out to the community to do chair yoga and things like that. But as much as we could, we really try to do that. And then we also went and got more educated. So we went to the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, which is an amazing organization that, trains people on racism and anti-racism specifically. And that was very cool and informative. And so that was also, so we like continually.
Yeah, you continue to learn how to do it.
To learn. And look, we're not like perfect. We're always learning.
Right. I mean, gosh, nobody is. I can figure that out. It'd be like sprinkle some fairy dust everywhere, right? But there's a belief that, I love what you said here. Like there was a belief you could make a difference and you really committed to it in your actions. Like you put your classes in alignment with your vision and your mission. And that has worked for the most part.
Yeah.
So, oh gosh, I had a few really good questions based on that came to me. But one, I just want to pause on the yoga tip and ask this personal journey question, which is, you said, I used to be risk averse, but I'm not really anymore. And that made me laugh because you guys, I'm just going to be real here for a minute. Erica and I met when we were like 18 years old, freshmen in college, and her spirit is the same, but who she is has evolved enormously. And that is like what's totally possible for each of us in a 20-year span of our lives, And so she showed up with a skirt that was denim on the top and, like men's ties coming off the bottom. And I was like,
it was my blossom skirt and I stand by it to this day.
And I was like, wow, that's like a bold move to roll into college with that like 1989 apparel. But she is like rocking it, and she has worked to get there, as in my experience. And so I would love for you to say to people, like, if you're sitting there and they're feeling risk averse, right? They're feeling scared, or they're feeling like safety is their jam. And no, I'm not saying leave your job and jump into being an entrepreneur. I really, having done that myself, I will tell you you should think it through very, very carefully. But I will say, like, when you have a whisper of something else that you want in your life, like, how did you navigate that for yourself, moving from being risk averse, like avoiding risks, to taking a pretty significant one, which is to open shop in Harlem and commit yourself to integrating into a gentrifying neighborhood?
I think a few things. I will be honest, as I think I said at the beginning, like what courage is, I sometimes think that there was like a part of my subconscious that knew what I was doing before I consciously knew what I was doing, because I had a great job at a big corporate company. I worked at American Express. I still think it's a good company. And it was hard to leave. And as my best friend, there were years where I was like, I want to leave and I don't want to be climbing the corporate ladder, but it took me a while. And I think a few things I did was I created some structured boundaries for myself. So I went back to school, and I joke all the time that I went back to get my master's so that I can open a yoga studio, because I think I sort of knew that I need a little space.
Yeah.
The part of me that likes structure and likes following the straight A student path was like, okay, I'm going to go to this really good university. I went to Columbia. And so you don't look bad if you go to Columbia. I'll just do that and see what happens.
Right. So there was some things about you worked your way out of it somewhat by still taking some safe choices on the path.
Yeah. And then, quite frankly, and this, my mother died my first year in school.
In graduate school?
In graduate school. So my first year in graduate school, my mother passed away. And I think that was the trigger for me to go back. I mean, for years I had been saying I wanted to get my certification to teach yoga, but I never made the time because I worked a lot. And I think, both as a form of healing from my own grief, and also I was like, shit, life is short. I got to go do this thing I want to do. I'm in grad school. I have the time. I, could use a lot of people oming at me for 6 months. I want to be bathed in light. I'm sad.
Yeah. And that's a lot better than bathing yourself in alcohol and other things that people do, or stuffing that down so deeply. And we've talked about that, I also had some sorrows, we've actually talked about how almost all of so many of our best friends from a certain period of our life have lost a parent, and, at formative times in our lives that has happened. And the way that you chose to go into it was I really believe also sort of shepherded you into a whole nother way of being in the world, and that maybe that was a gift your mom gave you.
I think that sometimes too, because my mom was kind of a spunky entrepreneur herself. She really was. And so I think I was like, okay, I'm just going to do that. And then a lot of it happened organically from there. I met Laurel, and we're so different in some ways, right? I was this straight A, went to University of Pennsylvania, played field hockey. Laurel and I joke continually that I played field hockey since I was 5, and she did quote, movement with Joan. She was totally this punk rock. She would go smoke cigarettes on our breaks. And I was like, I like this girl. I just immediately, we connected. And I think that would be the major answer to your question, if I had to boil it down, is I had a partner. So I did these things. I set up this structure. Then I had this huge event. My mother passed away, and I was life is short. And then I met Laurel, and she wanted to do it. And so doing it with her was so much less scary. I was like, oh yeah, I can totally help you. Because she, I think, is naturally not very
Right,
risk-averse,
right. Yeah. So that's a beautiful thing about relationships and partnerships, right? Like you found a way to have there be some safety in the risk.
Totally. And, even then when I took it easy. I peeled the Band-Aid off slowly. I didn't do anything that I took calculated risks, and, even when I left graduate school and we opened the business, I still had another job. But like even that decision, I think I sort of subconsciously picked a job that I knew I wanted to leave. Mm-hmm. So I didn't leave graduate school and try to find something that I was in love with because I knew that this business was what I was in love with. And so I was like, until it gets off the ground, I'm just going to sort of work a job.
Okay, so you did the overlap thing.
And I did the overlap thing for a little while. And then at a certain point, then I don't know what made me just take the plunge finally. I think a little bit the business was growing. I believed in it.
And how many years was it?
Almost 3 years that we had been open. And I left my corporate job post-graduate school. I went to India for 4.5 months, which was amazing. And, knew that then I would just do the business when I got back.
Right. Okay. And so you came back from India, you went full force into the business. Did you keep some other pieces in place for you for financial security?
Yes, I did it up until just this past year or the last year. So yeah, again, like I was, that's what I mean. Like I didn't go whole hog. So then when I got back from India, about 6 months, we were just working on the business. And then I maintained a relationship with a wonderful women-owned company, people I had known through my years at American Express, and I worked part-time for them, which was great. I also kind of liked, I have to say, for anyone who's thinking about going off on their own, I mean, it's amazing. I wouldn't say not to do it, but it can be like weird being all by yourself. And I even had a brick and mortar place, which was helpful, and I had a partner. But there was something about going into an office once or twice a week for a few hours that made me appreciate yoga business even more. And like, it was fun to like occasionally get on the subway and like get the New York Times and buy a coffee and like put on something that wasn't yoga pants.
There's two things about that I love so much. One is that we can be like our own walking paradox in some ways, like we can be somebody who's super athletic and likes to get their ohm on. We can be somebody who loves to ride the subway with a coffee in the New York Times and like go chant in a kirtan, in the other part of town, whatever. You can have that duality and you can make changes in your life in ways that are comfortable for you. Like some people do dive right in head first, Other people, they step through their change process at a pace that feels like they can digest it. And if they don't, then there's the risk that you don't ever take a risk. Like if you think, you have to go full hog right out the gate, some people never make a change. So I just want to throw that out there to people who are listening, like your version of change, that process can be the degree to a discomfort that works for you. You know what I mean? Like Laurel could go faster because that's who she is and you needed to step through it a little differently because that's who you are. So can you talk a little bit about like that paradox thing that I just said and just how that has shown up for you as you've continued to do this work?
Oh my God, totally. Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's like, it's kind of cool. Like, and I noticed this about myself. I mean, even when I was way before I decided to leave, and go back to graduate school, there was always a part of me that was like sort of the hippie at the office, like I was sitting in.
Wait, I have to say that's hilarious to me considering that I lived where I live in Boulder, Colorado, in like the land of lovely hippies, educated hippies. So thinking of you as one in New York is like, what? That's hilarious.
Right. I mean, and only, it all depends on where you are. But like, I remember I sat on like one of those giant balls before anyone did. And, everyone thought that was like hilarious. And, I was sort of involved in some, more like social justice-y things, involved in elections and caring about these things. And, I had dear friends and still have dear friends from that time. But I don't know what I think, what it is when I was in graduate school, actually, and I loved graduate school. I just loved to be learning for sort of the sake of learning. And it was all these subjects of, group dynamics and conflict resolution and, cultural competency and learning about the UN and all these things that I love. But I also realized how much I liked doing that in the evenings most of the time. And during graduate school, I did work part-time in the corporate world to sort of pay. And I noticed how much I loved the juxtaposition. Like I had my little business outfit on and then I went to school and studied and then I went back to business and it made me appreciate that more. So I was very aware of that and very aware of my own risk aversion to an extent. So I just sort of knew that I wanted to go slow and it worked out well because that also, I was able to be the financial stability for the business. So like, at first it was tough. I paid people out of my own pocket at first, because I had a job so I could.
Wait, thank you. That's awesome. I love that you're saying that because look, there are things that go along with pursuing a dream, whether or not it's a business or not, like there are things that it takes to, when I started my business, this, who did I ask to help me promote myself?
Yeah, your friends.
Yeah, my friends and family.
They love you, yeah.
Yeah, people who already know and love me and believe in the work that I do because they've been, getting coached by me for years,
for free.
That makes total sense. You know what I mean? That like you got to harness what you have when you're pursuing something that's new and maybe scary or different or risky or a dream, just a dream,
Yeah, and I think the thing you said is so like true to point out to people. And I think we're going a little off the beaten path, but like that idea of if you like force yourself to be like, well, if I don't quit my job and like, move across the country, like if you make the goal or the change so big that it like terrifies you,
right,
you're probably not going to do it. It has to like scare you a little, but not, for me at least, it has to scare me a little, but not be so terrifying that I'm not going to do it at all. And I think that's how I did it. So I sort of monkey branch from thing to thing to thing. So like over 10 years, my life has changed immensely, but every 6 months it only changed in increments. And that was like what I could handle.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's awesome. Okay, cool. So that's how you got to be what you are now, which is really, I mean, again, this is not who you were 15 years ago. So I just love that how people can evolve. It's so cool. But you really have become an expert in a lot of ways on social justice and activism in the yoga world specifically, right? So can you speak a little bit about that? What, social justice means to you and how you have harnessed your business through yoga to make a difference in your community and speak up?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I want to give credit. So I've always sort of been involved in these things to some degree, like found it interesting, found politics interesting, found different causes that I cared about. But I got really involved in how like the yoga world and the combination of yoga and social justice through a training I took off the mat into the world several years ago. And I think that, again, that sort of gave me the courage to just go for it. So I think I always cared, but I was like, well, who am I? So we were doing these things and we were at the studio really active and aware in our small community. And, we were going out and teaching chair yoga and we were doing groups on cessation of smoking in hospitals and we were offering full figured yoga. So there was an element all along of building community and being welcoming and, those types of things. But I guess until I went to this training.
This off the mat into the world training.
Off the mat into the world, yeah, with Sean Corn and Hala Corey and Suzanne Sterling and, who are all huge mentors, and particularly Sean Corn, who I've studied with quite a bit. And so then I was like, oh, like this is amazing. And I think I don't know if it was my natural inclination to think about things sort of systemically, but there was that element of yoga that we talked about at the beginning where it can sometimes feel like a really fancy gym class where it's just like everybody's in a perfect outfit. And like that always sort of bothered me in a way. And, not that I didn't like those classes or, whatever, but there was...
Or the clothes, right.
Or the clothes. I like a cute outfit. But like, there's this thing that sort of always bothered me and I couldn't like quite put my finger on it. And I guess I was like, the way they sort of articulated, or I was able to then articulate after the training, the sense that like, here we are exploring our bodies and like becoming spiritual and like getting healthier and releasing tension and all these things that we're doing. And like, to what end? Like, if you're just doing it to like be able to do a handstand, it like, you know what I mean? And I think there's always that sense in me of like, there's got to be more to this.
Right.
And I think to a large degree, what we do at Harlem Yoga was sort of that, like, let's create community. But then there was this sort of calling, like, but it could be even more.
Got it. So it started off with community within Harlem. Like, let's be a gathering place. Yeah. And then it became, how can we be a voice for justice on a bigger scale? Yeah.
We want to be a community. We want to be helping people. We want to make sure. And, in these little ways we have been for a long time. I just don't know that I would have called it social justice. And then I sort of got the language for it. And the fact that, like, also the sort of, I guess, the courage or the sense that I wanted to, like, really say out loud, hey, like, to me, yoga is not just a personal practice. And everyone necessarily believes that. And I'm not saying it's, like, quote unquote, the right answer. But for me, it's not just a personal practice. Like,
got it.
We need to get better ourselves. We need to, like, connect to our own experience, our own bodies, our own breath, our own demons, our own shadow. But, especially given just the demographics of the yoga world, for the most part, it tends to be many, able-bodied, relatively affluent, educated people who can do a lot to help the world.
Who can do a lot. So they're positioned. A lot of people who practice yoga, I think this is what you're saying, let me make sure I understand, are just naturally positioned to use their privilege to affect change if they wanted to.
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Love it. And how do you see that playing out in the yoga world these days? Are more people getting on board with Sean Corn's, off the mat into the world's message? Or what do you see?
I think so. Oh, well, it's hard to say. You know how, like, when you get involved in something, you see it everywhere?
Right. Of course.
So, I am by no means the first person to take this training. People have been doing this for a long time. Sean's been doing it for years. Carrie Kelly, like, these people have been doing it, but I think it is growing a lot. I mean, I think it also has a lot to do with our current political environment, that many more people are more eager and perhaps even anxious to get involved.
Yeah.
And I think what I have found, not just in the yoga studio, but in some of the other social justice groups that I'm part of or whatever, it's like people just want to know what to do. It's kind of hard to know what to do. It feels so overwhelming.
Yes.
I think, especially when it's not super local. So when it's super local and you're like, I'm going to go to my soup kitchen, then you just go to your soup kitchen and that feels like, okay, I know what I'm doing. But if it's more than that, I feel like if it's more than super local and you want to get involved in some policy or some government, at least I felt like sort of overwhelmed, or that I didn't know what to do.
I think that's very common.
And so I think in the yoga world, it's like there's all these studios out there, all these people, many studios. I mean, I'd like to believe, and I do think that our studio does it particularly well, where we really create community really well. But I think a lot of yoga studios are sort of a gathering place and a community. And so, like, why can't we use that power or that, that voice, our collective presence to make some change? And so I think that does seem to be happening more in the yoga world. It's certainly happening in the circles I'm in, but I also, I guess, seek those circles out.
Right, of course. Right.
So I can't really tell, but I would say my gut is yes.
I love it. So we're going to put in the show notes some of the things you've mentioned, off the mat, into the world, the People's Institute, and a few things like that, because I do think that if you're listening and this particular topic fires you up, I mean, there's lots of ways to be of service in the world, so many, starting by literally just being a kind-hearted, generous human being on the planet. Let's just start there. But beyond that, whatever it is that lights you up, there are so many ways to get involved, and I know that it can be overwhelming. So if this one is one that fires you up and you're curious, like, how could you maybe you practice yoga somewhere around the country or world, and you're wondering, how could you introduce something like off the mat into the world to the studio owners where you go, that kind of thing. We'll make sure that you have that information, because I do feel like the power of Naked Conversations and podcasts in general is this ability to use our voice, our collective voice, in this way to have other people's voices be heard, and that is really what has excited me too. So I'm not in the yoga space in that way, but just in this idea that we all have the opportunity, if we do, in which you and I do, to speak up. So we will make sure that there's like opportunities for people to check out these things you're mentioning, because they're awesome. So
yeah, I'll give you a bunch.
Yeah, that'd be great. So you guys have really evolved into this sort of mission-based yoga studio. You obviously still just offer lovely yoga classes, which I haven't taken, but you really expanded your voice into activism and social justice. And can you tell us a little bit about how did you actually build a community? I mean, when you started, you literally hung up a sign and hoped people would come. So tell me what the community looks like at Harlem Yoga Studio, who goes.
Yeah.
What were some of the first steps you took to actually cultivating the community you dreamed about?
Yeah, so you were totally right. It was crazy when we first opened. We had a flyering party and we handed out all these flyers, and then we were like, so I guess people will show up, and then they did, and we were kind of shocked. It was kind of funny. We were like, whoa, people came. I think that a few things. Some were really just business things that we did well, half on purpose, half by accident. We didn't sort of, and this is something I was going to say earlier, we named our studio Harlem Yoga Studio. We were very this is what we are. And then from the very beginning said, we're all about being welcoming, accessible, affordable, and fun for everybody. Nice. And we just drilled that in, and we were true about it. And then we did a bunch of things. We were very conscious about hiring people who represented the community. Teachers of different sizes and shapes and colors who were, representative of the different students who come. And Harlem is very diverse. And, we do have many of the people who have moved there more recently, but we also have many of the people who've lived there for a long time. We have, a big mix. I don't go to that many other studios now because I just don't have time. I think we definitely are a bit more diverse, even than other studios in New York, not only in racial diversity, but also we tend to have more guys that I've noticed, which is just interesting. A more, a pretty broad age group. So yeah, and I think it was just, I can't say exactly other than we just said what we were, and then we kept saying it and we kept doing it. I think that's the big thing. We didn't lie about it. You know what I mean? Even when our full-figured yoga class was not getting anyone, we'd have one or two people, we kept it on the schedule because if we're committed to having full figured yoga, then we can't just be committed if it's making us money. So like things like that, we can,
Yeah, you made choices.
Yeah, we made choices. Even when we had a community prenatal class, like that's very hard to find in the city. But we're like, well, there's a lot of moms in
What
this
does that mean, a community prenatal class?
Donation only prenatal. So prenatal classes can be really expensive. And we have excellent prenatal teachers, like excellent. Every single one of them is a doula, and Laurel, who's my partner, has gone to the midwifery school with Ida May, who's big in that world. And these people know what they are doing. And so they're trained so that they can teach somewhere theoretically that charges $30 a class. And we still charge $14. And we also had a donation class. So we did things. And we are a business. Like at the end of the day, I want to be able to support myself, but we did not make profit our only measuring at all.
Yes. Your only measuring stick. I love that.
We're able to do that in part because I took it slow. I didn't have to. I didn't have the pressure, like not being able to pay my rent if I didn't, cancel every class that wasn't sold out.
Yeah, right.
So,
got it.
And, we committed to it, and we put things in place personally and as a business so that we could continue to offer these things. And then we did a lot of like fun things too. Like, I think part of it is just the community themselves and the people we hired. Like the number one thing I say I hire on is just like people. I mean, this is going to sound so yoga and woo-woo, but like your vibe. I want you to be a good teacher, and our teachers are excellent, but like
you really want to feel like they bring positivity.
Yeah, and like just welcoming and warm and like, not cliquey or not performative. We always had a wide variety of not just teachers, but yoga styles. Mm-hmm. So even in that regard, which, not everyone loves. Like if you're an Iyengar person, you want to just go to an Iyengar studio. So we're not, we don't try to be everything to everybody, but we're saying like, hey, here's a faster paced vinyasa class with music that Elle teaches. And then here's like a very alignment focused class without music that I teach. Here's, Lauren, who's going to like take you to church. And here's Sarah, we have these different teachers. So I think that also helps.
You allow them to bring their own self-expression.
Totally. 100%. Like we have certain the community. Things. Mm-hmm. But every teacher can like really bring their own piece. And then we kind of set a structure of like, being nice. we try to just be nice. And our students are so nice. Yeah, we have the greatest, sweetest. I mean, I can't tell you how many mamas, I know kids since they were in the womb who are now 5.
I love it. Who are just loyal and come and feel at home there.
Their mom was pregnant, coming to prenatal yoga. Then they came to baby and me class. Now then they were in the toddler and me class. Now they're in kids class.
I love it. So everybody's engaged. Awesome.
The cutest. Really the cutest.
So what about like all these teachers that you've brought on board? How do you, if you do, I don't even know, what does it look like to talk to them about social justice? And do they participate out in the community in different ways and represent your studio and your work?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we don't force it on people, right? Like, I think just by virtue of who we have hired, we have various teachers of color from other countries, people in the LGBT community. And some of them are very active, some of them are less active, but they all, are engaged. We also have sort of mandatory training that we do every year or so. Because, in the yoga world, teachers turn over a bit. And we just also, it's nice to get a refresher. So we work with different organizations. My dear friend Leslie Booker has come, an organization called Bending Towards Justice. We do a sort of just a refresher on racism and ableism and just how the yoga community and yoga teachers and the yoga space can either continue to sort of, create the problems that happen outside the classroom or can be a place of, of change.
Yeah.
So we do that every year as well.
So totally you've built partnerships. You've built partnerships with other organizations.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
We do a lot of trauma-informed yoga, and I'm on the board of an organization called Exhale to Inhale, which works with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So we do, but I think the big thing is that it's clear to our teachers that we care about this.
Yeah.
And it's, we pay for this training and they go for free. And,
awesome.
They have to go. So and there's
you've made it a part of your company culture.
But we make them do that. And they want to do that, They sound like they don't want to. So.
Right, or they wouldn't work there. Honestly, you've created it as such a part of your culture.
There's been a few people over the years who've, dropped out. And, I think most of it's just because they're actors and they get a big gig and they move. But I think one or two were maybe that wasn't what they were about, they cared enough about that to want to participate.
Okay, so what would you tell people who are listening who are like, wow, this woman has done so much. I'm just starting out. And I know that I want to help and be of service in some way. What would you say, to somebody who's, I just want to hammer home for people, this wasn't always what you were doing. You know what I mean?
No.
That in some ways you were straight and narrow. You got a degree from Wharton Business School initially.
I was sending a lot of direct mail. Yeah. Like a lot. So much direct mail. I'm so good at it.
What would you say? Direct mail is like those junk mail mailers that we get from like credit card companies all the time, right? Yeah. Okay. Just making sure that I even know what you're doing a lot of that. Now you're oming your head off. Right. Okay.
No, I would say, I think do something little and sort of dive into that little thing. Mm-hmm. So, again, like you don't have to do everything all at once, but whether if you're wanting to get involved in like social justice issues, get a little bit educated. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And like, there is so much out there already, but like go find, like what I did, the really first social justice, like real campaign I worked on was the Fight for 15, which is about the minimum wage for, raising the minimum wage to $15. Mm-hmm. And I just like showed up at this meeting. And like what I have been good at from my direct mail days, I'm like good at organizing stuff and like putting things in a spreadsheet and like being a nerd.
You're very good at that. Your really bed is always made.
Good. My bed is always made. Every day. But so I did that, right? I was like, oh, well, I can do this and I can do that. And then like I sort of got my like leadership footing. And I was like, this is actually not any different than other things I've led. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was just sort of getting that confidence. So I would say like dive into something that you care about in like a smaller way, and then you'll just gain confidence. And I'm still not like I don't feel like the expert by any means on like organizing, right? Like I know a lot of people, and I've taken training since then, and I'm still not the expert, but I'm more confident than I was, and I'm less afraid to mess up. I think that's also it. I'm also like, well, I know I'm trying. I know I'm doing the best I can. I know I'm not going to do anything that's going to cause like harm. So like if I don't do the best job, on this social justice cause, we have mindful community and action meetings, and we have them once a month just to try to like gather our community and work on social justice issues. It's been like a journey because we started off when we really wanted like the community to take charge. And then after a few months, we were like, you know what? That's just not working. Everyone sort of...
You're going to lead it. You're going to have to lead it.
And so we had to step in. And I was like, okay, lesson learned. So you sort of play around and you learn. And that's sort of how we've done it. I don't know if I
love it. So, no, you did. So the number one thing is to start with something small that feels doable to you and maybe offer a skill that you're confident in already. Like, you're like, I can do a spreadsheet, and to sort of put your toe in the water. Yeah. And then I love what you said, which is that you built confidence over time the more you played in this, activism world. And one of my mentors always says, Elizabeth D'Alto, she says, confidence comes from evidence. So you got more and more evidence to, hey, I can show up in this way. I can lead in this way. Yeah. And then from that confidence came less fear around messing up. You got less concerned that you were going to do any harm.
Yeah, and especially in the justice world, and same with yoga teaching. I've been teaching for, 10 years now. I'm much less worried. And I probably, in some ways, I make more mistakes when I teach. Like I'm like left foot, right elbow, what? But my classes are probably a lot more fun, because I'm willing to take, not risks in the sense that I'm going to risk anyone's physical body.
Well, you're more yourself.
But I can kind of be more playful because I'm like, oh, at the end of the day, if I like do the lunge on the right side twice, like everyone's going to be okay.
Right. Totally. 1000% that. Obviously, this is about naked conversations, which is about being you. And then the more you are, the more powerful you can really be, because people can relate to you. So I love that. If we do the lunge twice on the right side, it doesn't really matter. We're there. We're on the mat. We're in community and we're growing together. So I love that so much. So lastly, you now take some of this work around community building and being more aware of your body and using your body to inform, the way you live your life. You've begun to take that into organizations and corporations, right? Yeah. So for those who are listening who might work in a more traditional 9-to-5 setting or 9-to-7, sometimes it's like that. Yeah, exactly. Tell us a little bit about what that looks like, where you bring these kinds of conversations into a more formal environment that you used to work in.
Yeah, I know. It's funny, like full circle. So basically the idea is, combining my background in organizational change, in group dynamics and conflict resolution with the many years of study and, practice in yoga and embodied awareness. And embodied awareness, for those of you who don't know, or, just to give you a sense, is like this idea of being aware of your body, not in this totally practical way, but in an exploratory way, right? In a discovery way. And the fact that these two things sort of overlap a lot. So when there's an organization, like a corporation, for example, if there is a leadership change or a brand new project that's due, oftentimes like everything is being addressed on like a very not surface level, but like, all right, we're just going to move these pieces around and here's the new org structure. And like, it's expected to sort of move smoothly, but
yeah, action.
Yeah, exactly. It's all, and like, that's sort of how our culture is. And that's certainly in my experience of many years working both as a consultant and in an organization, corporate culture is sort of like drive and do, and that's fine. But, can we sort of see and like explore, hey, what's happening in the system? And then how is that impacting us on the individual level? And can we do a few things, as an organization to both like call it a light, hey, this is actually what's happening. So, Sally just moved above Mark, but actually the way things are really going down is everyone's going to like Danielle, and everyone sort of knows that, but no one's really talking about it. And then how is that impacting everybody, not just like on the day-to-day how work is getting done, but how's it impacting you in your body? And then like in your commitment to doing the work. So it's sort of taking those two things and, being a little bit more open with them. So it's not like we're doing a bunch of, downward dogs with your colleagues necessarily. I mean, I do that too.
Although you could.
I do that too. I offer yoga classes.
But bringing more awareness and honesty.
Yeah, bringing more awareness and honesty and like an attention to the body. Mm-hmm. That is not only just good for each individual person, employee, organization member, but also can help to diffuse some of the tension points between people.
Mm-hmm. So everybody's working together more effectively, more smoothly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And just being more aware, and then, can also serve as a bit of a team building thing as well. So do kind of work together, and you have to, it's different than a yoga class, and I approach it a little bit differently because there are these, there's the structure and a formality to it, certainly corporate America, but even other organizations. But how do you, in that space, like play a little bit, get a little playful?
Right. It's like going into Harlem. You have to be very culturally sensitive to the organization or company or neighborhood that you're walking into if you want it to be effective. That's really what I firmly believe. Like, we can shout from the rooftops, but if we don't say it in a way that allows people to hear us, it's totally irrelevant. We have to really be able to show up and be sensitive and aware and culturally tuned in so that people can receive what it is you have to offer,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So this was super fun. Love hearing more about your journey, even though we've been friends for a really long time. To be honest, we don't usually have this kind of conversation. So it's super fun to hear, actually spoken out loud, how you can go from fear and risk aversion into really having a huge voice in a community and beyond, and really choosing to stand behind what you believe in and stepping little by little into that. And that each one of us, can do that in our own way if we desire it. So people can find you at Erica Barth.
ericabarthyoga.com.
Great. I will put that in the show notes, and obviously also a link to Harlem Yoga Studios. If you are in the New York area ever, it's super awesome to check out their studio. It's a special place for sure. And if you are curious more about what she does or what she's creating in the world, I'll make sure those resources are down below. You are awesome. I absolutely love you so much.
I love you too. This was so fun.
Yay. We'll do it again.
Awesome. I love you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's keep this conversation going over at sagebhabs.com/Facebook, our private free Facebook community where we have deeper conversations, the opportunity to connect with other amazing women like you who are asking these questions around how to live courageous, fully self-expressed lives. sagebhabs.com/Facebook. Can't wait to hear from you over there. And if you have any pressing questions or a way in which this show is making a difference in your life, please email me directly, sage@sagebhabs.com. I'd love to hear from you. See you next time.